very much. Right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this in-person meeting of the Climate Emergency Advisory Committee. My name is Councillor Katie Dye. I will be chairing today's meeting. Can I please ask members to introduce themselves, and can I remind you to mute your microphone when you've finished speaking? So we'll start with Councillor Thompson then, please.
Good afternoon, Councillor Eleanor Thompson from Guiseley and Broughton Ward.
Good afternoon, everybody. Councillor Abdul Hanan, Headingley High Park Ward.
Hello, Councillor John Tudor from Killingbeck and Seacroft Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Adrian McCluskey, Farnley and Wortley.
Good afternoon, Councillor Mohammed Shazad from Moortown and Meanwood.
Good afternoon, Councillor Peter Carlyle, Carley and Farsley Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Ed Carlisle for Hunslet and Riverside Ward.
Mike Foster, Councillor for Ardsley and Robin Hood.
Good afternoon, Councillor Norma Harrington, Wetherby Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Barry Anderson, Adlan Wharfdale Ward.
Thank you very much. And can officers now introduce themselves, please?
Good afternoon, Polly Cook, Chief Officer, Climate, Energy and Green Spaces.
Good afternoon, Rachel Wainwright, Policy Officer in Climate, Energy and Green Spaces.
Afternoon, George Munson, same team.
Good afternoon, Toby Russell, Clerk for the committee.
Thank you very much. So, Toby, can I ask you to run through the first items on the agenda, please?
Yep, thank you, Chair. So, agenda item number 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Agenda item number 2, there is no exempt information that would exclude the press or the public. Under agenda item number 3, there are no formal late items. Under agenda item number 4, can I ask members to declare any interests? Thank you. And agenda item number 5, so apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Downs, and I think was just waiting on a Councillor Bowden and Councillor Newton and Councillor Rafik also. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let's start with the minutes of the previous meeting. That's the meeting that was held on the 27th of November. So can we go through, and if there are any corrections or matters arising you would like to bring, then can you bring them up as I go through each page. So first one is page 5. Okay, so can I just add some things on page 5 that I think should have been minuted, but I didn't notice it originally. But under the open forum, we did discuss the contributions that had been made in a previous meeting, and the committee agreed that I would write to the council's leadership team to remind them about consultations and making sure that they were accessible and inclusive, and I think that should have been recorded. And then also in the open forum that we had 3 previous contributors who had all had responses. Rachel, that's correct, isn't it, from September and October? And I think that should have been in the open forum bit as well. So
Okay, thank you. I'll take that way.
Super, thank you. Page 6, anybody? So can I just note, and it's just a reminder for everybody that we now have set dates. Thank you, Rachel, for doing that, for all 4 of the working groups. So we've got Economy and Finance on the 31st of January, Biodiversity, Food and Waste on the 29th of January, Community and Business Engagement on the 5th of February, and the Planning and Buildings on the 6th of February. And it will be brilliant to see as many of you as possible who can make it at those working group meetings, please. They're all online. Okay, anybody else on page 6? Page 7? Page 8? Page 9?
Just on the 4th bullet point about the connectivity between the bus station and the rail stations, the White Rose station sort of refers is connected to the bus station. It's just connected to the White Rose bus station rather than the central bus station, just in case there was any confusion over that.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you for clarifying that. I had one as well on page 9 that Martin said we were going to get information on planning for the planet and community growing, and I don't think we have had yet. So can we chase that up, please? Thank you. Anything on page 10? Page 11? 12? And 13. Councillor Tudor.
Don't know whether it's exactly an amendment, but the Yorkshire and Humber climate people haven't yet managed to get through to me, so I'm going to start harassing them to come to our climate project in Seacroft because they seem keen to come, but these things sometimes get lost. So I shall be pursuing that.
Thank you. That would be very much appreciated. Councillor Carlisle.
Sorry, I missed this one. This is page 9. So have we determined whether the car sharing scheme still exists? That's near the bottom of page 9. She would be raised to determine whether the scheme still existed.
Thank you. Councillor Carlisle.
That was the one. I think the Leeds scheme actually went bust. So we'll be seeking another product, which is is it car share with a K? I think it's spelt. There is a West Yorkshire one that still is in existence, but how much it's used, I don't know. But that's something to pick up maybe when the next. It's normally in the Transport Committee annual report, which I think Transport Strategy annual report, which I think comes here as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, happy to agree those as a true record. Thank you very much. All right, so that takes us on to item 7, the Climate Emergency Advisory Committee annual report, which I'm assuming everybody will have read, and I'm going to hand over to Polly.
So I'm also going to assume everyone's read it and give a very high level summary. So I think it's really important to note the report is capturing what we've done as a committee and the working groups. It's not about every piece of climate work that's happening across the council. So it's trying to show the impact of that and make sure we capture it. The way that it's been set out is picking up on the key themes. So looking at policy, actual delivery of schemes, but also looking at engagement. It reflects on the benefits that we've got from open forum, so where there've been sort of practical impacts that have come from that. So anything from the research that's been done around the rubber crumb, but also around consultation and getting feedback from the community about how we do that as a council, and then also looking at the 4 different working groups and the different areas that they've looked at, the external speakers that we've had, but also where the committee or the working groups have helped shape how we've taken things forward. So one key example, I suppose, is like the hug scheme and how we then use that feedback to help shape it in order to deliver that with the public. But I am just going to leave it there because I think it's probably more important to have a discussion about the paper and where we get to, rather than me repeat what's in there.
Thank you, Polly. So I'm going to open it up for questions and comments about the paper. Councillor Carlisle.
Thank you, Chair. I'll come in briefly on it. I was just going to check back against the terms of reference as well and just see what we had covered. But we've got a note around the work of the committee that's in there, and that goes quite into depth. There's quite a lot around the open forums that have come in. What we don't have in the report that I'm not sure whether it's useful to have in this section or in the more general action on the climate emergency report is any kind of requests from the committee in terms of lobbying to outside bodies, which I know we do discuss quite at length, the kind of things that unfortunately aren't in our power to do, but what we would request from elsewhere. And I wonder whether the annual report is a good place just to go back over any of those.
Thank you. Do you want to comment on that? I can quickly look through it. I thought there was something in there, but I haven't got anything highlighted. I was just furiously reading through it to see if I can find anything.
My initial view was that we had reflected where we'd made specific lobbying requests, but similar to Councillor Dye, I can't pull them to the forefront of my mind at this moment in time. So we'll take that away and just make sure that we have captured them.
Thank you, Polly. Any other questions, Councillor Anderson?
I don't know how we can incorporate this in, but one of the confusions that a lot of councillors have is we've got two reports. We've got this one, and then in a few months' time, you're going to be bringing another one that will go to exec board that explains in more granular detail the successes or otherwise that we've had. Is there any way that we can have make reference at this stage to anything you're just about to put into that report, so that, which then comes to the point that's been made here, we maybe across, we're both working on the same thing. You're reporting on it, but it originated from us, or equally we've reacted to something that you've given us the leadership on without knowing what's in your report. You see, I can't give any examples, but the two reports usually come out within a month or so, 6 weeks of each other. And is there any way that we can combine the two?
So this year they won't come out that closely. So we've put in the second paragraph the fact that we've delayed it until September now. And that's to link in with the carbon disclosure project, because that's when we do the data analysis for that. So rather than doing it twice in a year, we've tried to bring them in sync this year. So the last report was published in January. We could put a link into the January 2023's report so that people have got that as context. And obviously next year it will be linked to the September. Yeah, so we can add that in. Yeah, no, exactly.
Thank you. Thank you for that suggestion. Councillor Foster.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this really qualifies for this debate, but I'll ask it anyway. Is there anything in the report that suggests that this committee is aware of the success of Leeds City Council's drive towards carbon neutrality by 2030, which I believe is sooner than the national target? So I'm just saying, are we aware? We've been going at it for about, I don't know, nearly a third of the project between 2019 and 2030. How well are we succeeding along on that journey?
I was just going to bring you in, Polly, as well. Sorry.
It's hard when you sit next to each other, isn't it, when you're on Teams? So we tend to capture the data for that within the annual exec board report. So we show where we are. So we report on what the council's doing and what the city's doing, and show where that trajectory is. So that's where that is captured more than in here. But I think in terms of the council, I'm struggling to think of the percentage. It's about 50 to 60% since 2005. I'm looking at Chad, correct me in a minute. 2000 and when? Thank you. 63% since 2005 reduction.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Oh, Councillor Harrington, sorry.
I think the paragraph that you might have been looking for about consultation and lobbying, etc., is 3.1.6. Says the committee notes the capacity and capability of the local authority and wider city to deliver faster progress in reducing carbon emissions and adapting to climate change is currently constrained by factors beyond the local authority's control. The committee has and will continue to engage with national policymakers and others to advocate for the changes that would enable Leeds City Council, communities and business to accelerate action on climate change. Is that the one you were thinking of?
I think that there were meant to be specific examples. I think that was the conclusion, but I think within the report there should be specific examples, which I will reread and find.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you're right. I think we'll look for them, and if they're not there, put them in. Yeah, because you're right. That last paragraph's a general summary, isn't it? Rather than we did this on this. Yeah. Any more comments? Councillor Shazad?
Yeah, I think you've included it a bit in the appendix where you've written to Sports England and so on and so forth. It's in appendix 2 as part of the report page. So where you've made specific reference to the bodies that you've written to. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, just a general comment, if I can, I'd share that it could be down to me as well, but I still think we are struggling as a group or as a committee to actually make it more diverse and encourage more communities to get involved. Is something that me and Rachel are going to be looking going forwards, because I think, like I've always said, it's a matter of getting everybody on board and people from different backgrounds, different communities, and oh, what's happened there? No. Have we got an issue with somebody fixing it? Yeah, and not necessarily from the same people, from the same sort of backgrounds, or from those that are not able to, the inner areas where the deprivation exists. We need to get them on board as well, and it's not just a thing that it's a middle class thing, that it remains that those people who probably have the time and have those gardens or have the other facilities to actually do what they want to do, but we want to make sure that it's the climate is there for everyone and everybody's on board with it. If that's something maybe we could concentrate further on.
Thank you. I think that's a really important point, and one that maybe we can pick up when we have the chairs of the working group meeting in January to look at that as a focus, because I think that's certainly something that the working group that you chair could maybe look at as a real focus for. There's no reason why it can't come to the main committee, but I think that would be a really good place to start, and it's absolutely vital. We've talked about it many times, haven't we, that it's important to bring people along on this journey, and the more support we've got from all areas of the city, the better. Definitely. Thank you for raising that. Didn't mean to press that. I meant to ask it, is there anybody else who has any comments or questions they'd like to raise? Councillor Tudor.
I think I say this from time to time, but when the council write to every resident pre the local elections, we could put all sorts of information into this document, into this envelope that that isn't political, but is about the city, whether it's climate or whatever it is. I always think that's a good opportunity, that perhaps we could put more in that envelope for residents.
Thank you. Can I ask Polly, Rachel, is that something we've done before? Am I remembering correctly? Or was that about something else? I'm pretty sure some information has been out to people.
I think when we do things like the council tax bill, we've used it to promote different things, and Chad is nodding in the background that we have. I don't know if we did it in maybe 2019. Yeah. Yeah, so we have used it. I think there's always a bit of a fight about how much you can put in, and obviously there's always a lot of competing priorities for that, depending on what else is happening at the time. And I think there's, don't want to overload people so they end up missing what the key purpose of the letter is. So it tends to be just what you can fit on that one. But yeah, I think like Chad says, we've done it for the Leeds by Example website.
Thank you. Was there another hand over there? Was it Councillor Shazad?
Yeah, we did have it in the council tax letter. I can't remember the exact year, but it was on the back. We did have some information about the climate and what we're doing.
Thank you. And it is a really important point. I mean, it goes back to the whole engagement issue, doesn't it? The spreading the message and bringing people along. Okay, I'm looking around and I can't see any more hands. Is that correct? Is there anybody else who wants to say anything? Okay, Rachel and Polly, is there anything you would like to add? No? Okay. Oh, Councillor Rafiq, yep.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just like to kind of, well, thank all as the executive lead for climate, all the contributors and all the members of the CEAT committee. I think the work and of all the members, and well, not just the main committee, but the working groups where a lot of the work takes place, is crucial. Being as a critical friend as we move forward. And I think as a city, we are making some huge advances in this area, albeit there's a long way to go to get to reach net zero. So I think we are in many ways to get to where we are, at the start of our journey. So that's the way I see it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just want to echo that. Thank you for all the enormous work that's gone into producing the report. Thank you, particularly to Rachel for that. But obviously it encompasses a whole year's worth of work. So thank you to everybody who's attended and made contributions, and thank you to all the officers who are working incredibly hard behind the scenes. So thank you very much. Okay, so that moves us on to item 8, which I think, George, is over to you to present on the Community Climate Grants update.
Thanks, Chair, and sorry for the unexpected noise in the middle of the last item. I was just trying to join because I've got a couple of slides I just wanted to run you through. So I'll try the time-honoured sharing of my laptop. Fingers crossed it works. Okay, great. So you've all had a report on the Community Climate Grant, so I won't go through it in detail. But when we put the report together, we were in the middle of the assessment process for these climate grants, and we've now provisionally completed that. So what I wanted to update people on today was the provisional outcome from the assessment. We haven't communicated with any of the successful and unsuccessful bidders yet, so I won't go into any detail. It's summary information, but the purpose of today is really just get a steer from you about the next round and how we design that. So there's a bit of background. This fund came out of West Yorkshire Combined Authority, and it's focused on their climate environmental plan priority about getting some community proposals for greener, cleaner and climate ready neighbourhoods. It had quite a number of essential features that we needed to make sure all the bids met in terms of kind of reducing carbon, tackling equality or deprivation, and critically having the funding spent by December 2024, and then needed to fit into one of 4 different categories. Within Leeds, we had about £544,000 to give out. We ran an open application process. It closed on the 3rd of November, and we had 29 bids came through, which we were really pleased with. Of those, we have provisionally approved 9. So this table here just shows the ones that we received against the ones that we approved. And in terms of the values, we had quite a range of bids from between the 5 and 10k kind of minimum, up to quite a number that came in at £49,990 something pounds. We've approved more of the larger bids than the smaller bids, certainly in terms of value. But we've only allocated 285,000 of the 544 we had available. In addition, we have about another 100,000 from a reserve pot, and then a lottery grant that the Combined Authority is anticipating getting some funding from. When we look at why bids were not successful, I'm going to caveat this that there are a few that are marginal that we might just be able to scrape over the line if we can get some clarity on certain elements of the bids. But the biggest issues were around community group capacity to fill in grant application forms to the kind of quality standards that we needed. And the areas that they fell down on typically were around finance. So the bids, particularly on the higher end, if there was insufficient evidence around how the costs were built up, we felt we couldn't support it. And similarly, where staff costs were put into the bid, we needed to see clearly how those staff costs were tied to delivering the funded activities, and quite often they weren't. The other area that was kind of weakest, I think, was around targets. So making it very clear how the activities or the measurements of success were going to be, how things were going to be clearly measured. So it's quite often a little bit vague about how they would measure the success of the projects, and that some of them just didn't link to things like the carbon deprivation or inequality. So they were quite clearly just slightly wrong, the wrong funding pot for the idea that people had. But what we found is that quite a number of the projects were fundamentally really good ideas, things that we want to support, but just weren't quite expressed in the right sort of way. And we felt they could be funded if they were just given a little bit of additional support. So when we're looking at the next steps for us, we have around about 265,000 available from wave one, additional 100,000 that we want to put into this. We feel it's really important that we issue another round and complete it ahead of PERDA so that we can announce the winners, let them know, and then do the paperwork, while we have to be a bit more careful with what we say. So we've thought about some options for wave two. We put some in the paper, but we further kind of refined our ideas now. And the three sort of areas we wanted to explore with you were, firstly, to run a fully open process, similar to the one we did for wave one. Secondly, to offer previous applicants only the chance to bid again, so restrict ourselves to the 19 unsuccessful bids and ask them to improve their bids and get them in again. To invite applications from either underrepresented areas or groups. There were some bits of the city where we didn't receive any bids from, or only one, and they weren't successful. Or to look to combine two and three. So I'm really interested in ideas from around the table, what your preferences are in terms of how we think we should try to distribute the remaining funds.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing that information with us. So we've got 4 clear options that George would like us to discuss. Shall we start, before we move on to that, with any questions that anybody's got for George, and then we'll move on and discuss the options that we've got for wave two? Is that okay? So, all right. So we'll start with Councillor Hannan then.
Thank you, Chair. I know there's 2 questions. The first question is, you were awarded some money to a transport one. Can you elaborate who that is and what they do? And representing Headingley High Park, which is probably the most densely populated area in Leeds, I've noticed no bids have come from there. Can you explain why? And have you reached out to the relevant organisations that maybe could bid? And going forward, could we include organisations LS6 to be in the bidding process? Thank you.
Thanks. So take your first question first. We only had one transport bid, and we aren't planning to fund that one. I'm afraid I'm not going to go into the details of the bids because we haven't spoken to any of the winners or the unsuccessful for bidders yet. But certainly one of the options is to try to, in a future round, say if we didn't have successful bids from particular geographies within Leeds, to either exclusively say we're looking for bids from them, or to prioritise in the scoring those areas that were underrepresented. So I'm interested in views about the kind of fairness of that, I suppose.
Thank you. Councillor Carlisle.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question that I think then we'll come on to the point in the last one. One of the things that noted to me when we were talking around this funding was I then checked, and obviously one of the requirements is set to either be impacting an area of high deprivation, which obviously will then impact on the postcodes you've got shown there, or help reduce inequalities between a protected characteristic or carers. And I just wondered what the thoughts were for including that. Obviously, the deprivation side does exclude then some communities who may be the ones, unfortunately, because of the imbalances that you were talking about earlier, who may find it easier to apply for these and have the most time to apply for these. So I just wondered how that was thought through, that they were requirements, because I know there were probably organisations in my ward and others that may have applied had that not been a strong requirement?
I'm going to take the easy way out. This was something that was decided by West Yorkshire Combined Authority. They determined some of the kind of key requirements for the bids, and they said, as well as saving carbon, it needs to either address inequalities or sort of deprivation or a protected characteristic. So we couldn't change that. We found that with the ones that we've supported, roughly 50-50 between those two sort of buckets of bids. We've supported some where they've demonstrated that their service users are, for example, an elderly population. So what we tend to find is there's not that many groups that are completely excluded from bidding for this, but it does provide a challenge for some groups depending on precisely who they're working with.
Thank you, George. Is that Councillor Shazad wanting to speak? Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick one. You did mention in your presentation that the actual applications were quite difficult. And is there any reason why they were so difficult? And wasn't there any, I mean, obviously, just could we not connect them up with our localities team as part of the community committees to maybe help groups who are not actually that capable of filling out? Because I know with these grants, you need to have your bank account, you need to have all sorts of constitutions and all the other or work paperwork that you require. So wasn't there an opportunity to link up to help more people that they could fill them up easier?
Yeah, I mean, we tried to simplify things as much as we could. We based the grant application form on one that the councillors used successfully for small grants in the past, and my team spent quite a long time working with the kind of voluntary community organisations in the city and offered support to people ahead of bidding, and we had quite a high degree of take up from that. But I think it was mostly on that kind of finance side that most of them sort of fell down. I think it's a learning point from us that, you know, certainly those that have bid this time round, we can sit down with them and provide some guidance about, you know, what is it we're looking for. And again, with the next round, I think we would again encourage people to get in contact with us as soon as they can in the bidding process and spend a bit of time talking to the team about, you know, what are the standards that they need to try and hit. But I think it's just a recognition that, you know, a lot of community and voluntary groups they are volunteers, so they don't always have the time to put things together, which is why I think I'm really keen to try and build on the ones that have already put some effort into this and make sure that they're given some clear feedback and back in a way to bid again.
Yep, Councillor Shazad.
Yeah, thanks for that. And there's like a broad sort of postcode, which is very good because from what I can see, so it's all the way like from LS21, which is I think assume Otley, and all the way right down to LS9. I know we've got LS7 Chapeltown and probably missing, but it's quite broad, so it takes a lot of areas into it. Just a quick question: do you have any sort of figures of the diversity or inclusion of the groups bidding or the people that they were going to work with, if that's available?
I am 95% sure we put some details in the application form about that, but I would need to go back and check with the team. I didn't actually do the evaluation myself. I'll go back and check and get back to you.
Thank you. So next on my list is Councillor Bowden.
I guess with the sort of wanting our feedback, before that, is that money set, or is there a time limit to when the grants need to be used, for instance?
Yeah, so the grants need to be spent by December 24. So it's important that we kind of get it out there as quick as we can. Yeah.
Thank you. So, seeing as I can't see any other hands up at the moment, George, are you able to put on the slide that has the options that you'd like us to discuss? So that's for the remaining funding, the 265,000 plus additional funding, and the 4 options that you've outlined are there on the screen for us. So would anybody like to start the conversation on ideas? So I've got Councillor Bowden, Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I guess just with that answer before, we've kind of got the deadline of December. I think if that wasn't the case, I might have suggested the others, but I think I would probably go for a fully open process now. And whilst we have got like the postcodes, if I remember correctly, these are simply the bids, but these aren't necessarily what has been accepted. That's correct, isn't it? So yeah, I would suggest fully open then if that's the case, even though there might be some areas that are underrepresented. There's no guarantee that the ones that have put the bids in are going to receive the money anyway. So my opinion, purely on like time wise, would be option 1.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd prefer a fully open process as well, given there are considerable gaps at the moment, noticing that some postcode areas have multiple applications, but the outer northwest has, and other outer areas have significantly less. But also that we, at the earliest opportunity, have the information that we can share with local groups to help make it as fair as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harrington.
Not meaning to be obtuse at all, but my view would be that we've run the phase 1 and those groups have done it. I'm a little concerned about how widespread the information was for some of the other groups that were missing and some of the other postcodes that are missing. So my view would be to combine 2 and 3, offer it to the previous applicants with the hope that they would get the help to actually resubmit the bid, because they were probably pretty close, and then invite new applications from underrepresented areas, which Councillor Azad was talking about, and also the postcodes that haven't submitted any bids, not necessarily that have received money, but that haven't submitted any bids. By talking to ward colleagues in those areas, we can make sure that information absolutely gets out there to local community groups. But that's my view. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carlill.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering whether there was an opportunity to mix the lot up a little bit with perhaps a fully open process that prioritised 2 and 3 in terms of the bids. One of the concerns will be, I guess I'll come on to this, but if the previous applications that bid again don't manage to come up to scratch, we might not end up spending all the money, and others might have come in. And then obviously in the areas, we can focus on marketing it to some of those areas and to some of those groups that were underrepresented as part of it. However, we could have a fully open process that means if somebody does bid again and their bid is put together in a way we would be able to accept it, then that would be prioritised, but we're not putting at risk somebody new coming in to the process. One of the things I did want to touch on was just around offering applicants that chance to bid again. All of these things, when we're looking, some of them will maybe be put in just by individuals, couple of people that suddenly think of a new idea that hasn't come. They may not be a group yet. Some will come from organisations that are very capable of filling in these bids and doing them all times. I just wondered how much we thought of whether we could work with an organisation to help provide support to people. So with things like the climate action hubs that we've got going around, of whether they could be provided some support from the council on the bids and that they could then help disseminate that further. Otherwise, I think there's often a big gap for very grassroots organisers and community organisations from being able to bid. And sometimes the support we as a council provide is not tailored to the level they need as well. However, those kind of community hubs that are out there and that are in local areas tend to be able to provide that a bit easier.
Thank you. I will bring Councillor Tudor in, but I just wondered if you wanted to comment on that before we move on, George, because I think that's a really important point, that the whole bid writing process is a job in itself, isn't it, in organisations? And if we're wanting to reach small, really local climate groups that are all run by volunteers and maybe nobody in that group has any experience, is it possible for Councillor Carlill's suggestions of support to be taken on?
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea. I mean, we worked with Voluntary Action Leeds in the last round. We plan to work with them again, but I think the idea of using the hubs to kind of reach out to some of the smaller bodies out there is a really good idea. We do also offer the chance to kind of review bids before the deadline, but then that presupposes people have got time to write something 2 weeks in advance to send to us so we can give them some comments. So the more we can push out to people who can then support people with the putting things together in the right way is a really good idea. And I think, sorry, can I just comment on some of the other comments? Really useful to get all these views. We would be delighted if people saw this as an opportunity to push out to areas that are underrepresented. I think that's one of the key roles that members of this committee can do, just to really kind of raise that awareness.
Thank you. So I've got Councillor Tudor, Councillor Bowden, then Councillor Shazad.
I would just say that it's very difficult to predict what anybody's going to do when you make all the, if we make any assumptions about who will turn up next time round. So I think I would be a bit against option 2 and also the word of prioritizing. If people want to bring their bid back, having strengthened it, that's great. But as we were discussing, it'd be great to have a lot more bids, and they just sit on their merits, and it's awarded as it can't really be anything else other than on the merit on the day. And the Leeds Climate Commission, perhaps they can help as well.
Thank you. Who's next? Councillor Bowden.
It's just in regards to when the community groups were invited, and obviously I can see we've got the A, B and C in regards to green and climate, ready nature solutions, healthy, affordable and efficient buildings. Is it left quite open for them, or is there more concrete solutions to invite them to almost go for, if that makes sense? I'm just thinking there might be some community groups and stuff who would be really interested, but if it's really open-ended, they might then have to talk about what they actually want to do, whereas could we offer some more concrete solutions as to what could be really, like what other groups go for, or something like that? So it's more like they're picking from what they could potentially do. Then I'm just thinking we might get more of a take up if that's the case, rather than them having to have a committee meeting and them deciding if they go for this bid what they're going to do with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we can provide some more guidance. We put a guidance document together. The 4 kind of categories were predetermined by Wicker, but what we try to do is to give some examples of things that could be done within those. But I think you're right, making more of a explicit set of examples. I mean, we found that some of the ones that have been successful this time have focused on community buildings, improving those community buildings, putting solar panels on, improving the insulation, changing the heating systems, and things like that are quite concrete and deliverable, and then can be used to kind of communicate with users of those buildings. So those are quite successful sort of bids.
Thank you. Councillor Shazad.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one on your point 8. Total bids benefiting each area. Have these actually been? I know you haven't informed anybody, but does that mean the number of bids that have been accepted for those areas, or is it just an application that's not been determined yet? On point 8, your table that you've got total bids.
Yeah, so in the report, that was just the total bids before we did the analysis. The ones I put up on screen, where are we? Those were the ones, third column across, provisionally approved, are the ones that we're minded to support.
And so just as a follow-up, so in these postcodes then, this is not the true reflection of the number of bids that have been accepted then?
Those are the bids.
Submitted only, yes. So it might not be such a discrepancy once it actually it's out there, that there might only be, just even though 10 bids have been submitted from LS14, which is a very good area where the Aperture comes from, but there might only be one that's been accepted. So really, this table does not really allow us to really reflect on the points that you made further. But that again, so I mean, going on to what the chair has asked us to do, I would probably make it open, as Councillor Harrington has said, and but obviously we haven't really got those figures out where we could really determine how the actual process has worked out and who's got how many bids to say that it's been unfair in any way whatsoever. But I think if it's open and the quicker we get it out there to the communities, I think that would probably be the best bet, because if it has to be spent by December 2024, so we need to really kind of move along with it if possible. I don't know how we can force yourselves to do that.
I'm quite happy to be forced to do that. It's I do like to do things at pace, so my team is basically ready to launch these in the first part of the new year. As soon as Christmas is out of the way, we'll get these out there.
Thank you, George. Anybody else want to make any suggestions or comments? Okay, so doing a little bit of a tally as you were all talking. It seems that the mood of the room, George, is for an open process, but with a kind of support, and that can come in terms of using the climate hubs, climate commission, and us as members. You know, maybe writing out to all ward members and asking us to have a good think about organisations in our wards that we could possibly look to support ourselves, or you know, we can point them in the direction of where they can get support, and we can certainly make them aware that this process is happening, so that we're aware of everybody in our ward that might have not applied that possibly could. And then with I think people said to open but prioritise the ones who were unsuccessful and who, well, in terms of number 3, who come from underrepresented areas or groups. I don't know how you would do that, whether you could, I don't know, have some scoring system, weighting system. I don't know. That sounds to me quite difficult, but that seems to be the mood of the room anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a really useful debate, and I think a good idea. That the last thing we want to do is restrict ourselves and end up with fewer bids than the total sum of the funding. So we'll have a look at whether there is a way that we can prioritise during in the scoring system. I can see if there was a tie for scores, then you could prioritise, but it might be quite hard to put something in. Something that we will be able to do, and I'm aware it's a bit frustrating this meeting that I haven't been clear with the ones that have been funded. Clearly, we will publish that as soon as we can, so that you can then see those areas which are underrepresented and target communications at those.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that would be really helpful, because then that'll give us information to go back to our wards with, won't it? That we can say, well, nobody from my particular ward has been successful here, and what can I do to encourage that? Any final comments, Councillor Bowden?
Yeah, I know this has got brought up a few times, but is there a benefit of bringing it to community committees as well? We've got we have a lot of community staff as well who are constantly in communication with a lot of these groups as well as, so there might be a benefit of kind of bringing it forward. And obviously I know this committee doesn't represent every single ward, so it might be useful if there's an official, we're going to go into community committees, we know all the wards and they're going to be contacted. Just
thinking about that, is that something you have resources to do, or could you write out to the community committee chairs and make them aware of the process that was happening? And because there will be meetings that are imminent, and there will be some community committees where it'll be a while. So that seems to me a way of covering everybody to write out. Councillor Rafiq.
Yeah, well, you just to add to what you said, I think we've already written to all the members. I believe when we heard the news about this grant, the email went out from myself to all the elected members, if I can correctly remember, to cascade to all the networks in their areas. And we could do that again, just remind members, but I think we need to be, I'm slightly conscious of the time and the community committee processes as well, because they don't happen all in 1 week. You know, they could be spread over a couple of months, and that it's a resource issue as well. So we could write to the community committee chairs and remind them, but I think, you know, that's probably as much as we can do, given obviously the timing and the urgency to obviously get this processed and the time limit to get it spent by the end of next year.
Thank you. I think that would be a good idea, because, you know, the more it lands on people's desks, the more people are likely to take notice of it. So, I mean, I would certainly agree with rewriting out to all members. I think that's a good idea, but I don't think there's any harm in specifically sending it to community committee chairs too. Councillor Thompson, were you wanting to contribute?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as a community committee chair, I would really welcome it. And we can use our environment, housing and communities champions and subgroups as well, because they'll be quite good at getting the message out with their contacts.
Brilliant, thank you. Councillor Tudor, were you wanting to come in?
No, maybe localities officers, because they know a lot of things about a lot of people, a lot of fingers in pies.
Thank you. So some good suggestions there. Did you want to make any closing comments, George?
Only to say thank you. Some really good ideas. So we'll make sure we action those in the new year. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you. So rather speedily, that takes us to the end of the meeting. So that has to be a bit of a record, doesn't it? So thank you very much. Just to say that the date of the next meeting is the 22nd of January, and it is at 10 a.m. and it will be a remote meeting. So until then, thank you everybody for your contributions today and throughout the year, and I wish you a restful and nice break. Thank you.